The council chamber floated in the darkness of space, a massive ring of metal and light that housed the leaders of 5 great civilizations. Inside, beings from across the galaxy gathered around a circular table that glowed with soft blue light. They had ruled the stars for 10,000 years, spreading peace and knowledge to hundreds of worlds. But today, there was no peace in their hearts. Commander N stood at the center of the chamber. His 4 eyes moved across the faces of the council members, seeing the same fear in all of them. The hologram above the table showed a terrible sight: 12 star systems now empty. No planets, no stations, no life, just debris and silence. "The swarm has crossed the galactic rim," N said, his voice heavy with dread. "They consumed the Kelvin colonies in 3 days. The fortress worlds fell in a week. Nothing stops them, nothing even slows them down." An elder council member, her scales shimmering in the dim light, leaned forward. "Our weapons? Useless. They adapt to everything we use against them. Plasma, lasers, antimatter missiles. After the first strike, they simply become immune." N's hands trembled as he manipulated the hologram. "At their current speed, they will reach our core worlds in 6 months. Silence filled the chamber. 6 months until the end of everything they had built. A young archaeologist named as rushed into the chamber, breaking protocol. Guards moved to stop him, but N raised a hand. The archaeologist's excitement was clear, even through his exhaustion. "Commander, I found something. In the old archives, the restricted ones." As activated his data pad and new images appeared above the table. Ancient text, written in a language nobody had spoken for thousands of years. "It's about the humans." Several council members laughed. One elder shook his head. "Humans are a myth, young one. A bedtime story we tell our children. The brave species that could survive anything, that never gave up, that fought with honor and madness in equal measure. They're not real." "But what if they are?" as insisted. He showed them more images, star charts, coordinates, descriptions of a species that walked on 2 legs and had only 2 eyes. "Every ancient civilization in our records mentions them. The texts say humans vanished 3,000 years ago, retreating to the edge of the galaxy. But what if they didn't vanish? What if they just left us alone?" N studied the coordinates. They pointed to a region of space the Coalition had marked as empty, worthless. No valuable resources, no habitable worlds worth claiming. They had never even sent a probe there. "These legends say humans were different from us," as continued, his voice growing stronger. "They didn't follow the logical path of war. They used strange tactics, primitive weapons, and something the texts call spite. They won battles they should have lost simply because they refused to accept defeat." The scaled elder spoke again. "Even if humans exist, why would they help us? We abandoned that region of space. We never tried to contact them. Because according to every story, every legend, every ancient text, as said, humans had one rule they never broke. They protected those who couldn't protect themselves. They believed all thinking beings had the right to live." N made his decision. "Send a probe to these coordinates. If there's nothing, we've lost a probe. If there's something—" He didn't finish the sentence. Hope was a dangerous thing to speak aloud. The probe launched within hours. It traveled for 3 days, jumping through hyperspace toward the forgotten edge of the galaxy. The council waited, preparing for the disappointment of finding empty space. Then the probe's signal changed. "Commander," a technician shouted. "The probe found something. Multiple orbital platforms, defensive satellites, and ships, hundreds of ships." The chamber erupted in shocked voices. N silenced them with a gesture. "Show me." The hologram changed. It showed a star system alive with activity. Space stations orbited rocky planets. Ships moved between worlds, their designs unlike anything the Coalition had ever seen. They looked almost primitive, with visible armor plating and exhaust trails, but they moved with purpose and precision. "Life signs?" N asked. Confirmed, 2 billion on the largest planet, approximately 200 billion across the system. The technician's voice shook. Commander, they're transmitting. The signal is old, but it's one of the ancient greeting protocols. They're asking who we are. N felt something he hadn't felt in years, hope mixed with fear. If humans were real, if the legends were true, they might survive the swarm. But what price would these mythical beings demand? What would it cost to wake a species that had chosen to sleep for 3,000 years? Prepare the fleet, N ordered. We're going to meet the humans, and pray to whatever gods still listen that they're as honorable as the stories claim. The council chamber, which had been filled with despair moments ago, now buzzed with nervous energy. In 6 months, the swarm would arrive. But perhaps, just perhaps, they had found the one thing in the galaxy that could fight the impossible and win. They had found humanity. The Coalition fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the human star system. 50 ships, the largest diplomatic mission ever assembled, hung in the darkness like jewels against the black. Commander N stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the sensor displays with growing confusion. The human defensive grid had already locked onto them. Weapons systems tracked every Coalition ship with precision that seemed impossible for such old technology. But the humans didn't fire. They waited. Incoming transmission, his communications officer announced. The flickered to life. A human face appeared and N felt his breath catch. The legends were true, 2 eyes like the ancient texts described, hair on the head, not scales or feathers, a face that showed emotion clearly, openly. Coalition vessel, this is Admiral of the United Earth Systems. State your purpose. The human's voice was calm, controlled, but there was steel beneath it. N stepped forward. I am Commander N of the Galactic Coalition Council. We thought you were extinct, or a myth. Something that might have been amusement flickered across face. We're neither. We've been here the whole time. We've been listening to your transmissions for 80 years. 80 years, N's 4 eyes widened. Why didn't you make contact? We had our reasons. Your coalition seemed stable, peaceful. We saw no need to disturb that. Leaned back in his chair. But you didn't come all this way for a history lesson. What do you want? N transmitted the data about the swarm. He watched face as the human reviewed the information. 12 civilizations destroyed, billions dead, weapons useless against an enemy that adapted to everything. When looked up again, his expression was grave. And you want our help? We have nowhere else to turn. The legends say your people never abandoned those in need, that you fought for others, even when it cost you everything. Legends was quiet for a moment. Permission to come aboard my ship, Commander. Let's talk face to face. Hours later, N sat in a conference room that felt strangely primitive compared to Coalition technology. The walls were metal, not energy fields. The chairs were physical, not anti-gravity supports. But everything worked and worked well. Sat across from him, along with other humans, a woman named who introduced as his tactical officer, a younger man named, a ship captain with sharp eyes that seemed to see everything, and a woman named whose title was simply scientist. Studied the swarm data on a flat screen, her fingers moving rapidly. Your people have been fighting them for 3 months. Yes, we've lost every major engagement. That's because you're fighting them the wrong way, pointed at a section of the data. Look at this. The swarm adapts to energy weapons in approximately 6 minutes, kinetic weapons in 4 minutes, chemical weapons. She paused, scrolling through the data. There's no record of you using chemical weapons. We banned them 7,000 years ago, N said. They're barbaric, unpredictable. No civilized species uses them. And exchanged glances, spoke, her voice careful. We still use them. Lots of things you probably consider barbaric. Nuclear weapons, kinetic bombardment, chemical warfare. We never stopped developing these technologies. Why would you keep such primitive weapons? N asked, genuinely confused. Because they work, said simply. Because sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Because we learned that throwing away knowledge, any knowledge, makes you weaker, not stronger. Turned her screen around. They have never encountered truly primitive warfare. Every species they've fought has been advanced, following the same tactical doctrines, using the same types of weapons. They've adapted to sophisticated warfare. But human warfare, she smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. We're very good at being unsophisticated. Admiral stood, walking to a window that showed Earth in the distance, blue and green and alive. Commander N, I need to be honest with you. We don't owe the Coalition anything. You ignored this region of space for thousands of years. You never tried to find us, never offered friendship or alliance. N felt his hope dying. I understand. But continued, turning back to face him. We don't make decisions based on what we're owed. We make them based on what's right. And leaving billions of innocent beings to die because their leaders made mistakes, that's not right. That's not who we are. You'll help us. We'll do more than help. We'll fight. His face hardened. But understand this, we don't fight like you. We don't follow your rules of war, your ideas of civilized combat. We fight to win, using every advantage, every weapon, every trick we know. It won't be pretty. It won't be honorable by your standards, but it will be effective. Captain spoke up. How long before the swarm reaches your core worlds? 5 months now. Then we leave in 3 days. That gives us time to load weapons, brief our crews, and coordinate with your fleet. Looked at, who nodded. And felt emotions he couldn't name. Relief, certainly, but also fear. Fear of what he had unleashed, of what these humans might do. The legends spoke of human honor, but also of human ferocity, of a species that loved peace but made war like no other. As the meeting ended and N prepared to return to his ship, called out to him. Commander, one more thing. You should tell your people the truth about us before the battle. What truth? That we're not the heroes from your legends. We're not perfect. We make mistakes, we get angry, we sometimes do terrible things for good reasons. She met his gaze steadily. But we never, ever give up, and we never let our friends fight alone. 3 days later, the human fleet assembled. 200 ships, each one carrying weapons that hadn't been used in galactic warfare for. Aboard the UES Defiant, Captain addressed his crew. We're going to fight an enemy that's killed billions, an enemy that can't be beaten by conventional means. But humans have never been conventional, he smiled. Let's show them what happens when you wake up humanity. Let's remind the galaxy why they told stories about us. The combined fleet jumped to hyperspace, racing toward the swarm. And in the darkness between stars, humanity prepared to do what it had always done best: survive, adapt, and fight back. The defensive line stretched across 3 star systems. Coalition ships formed perfect geometric patterns, their shields linked, their weapons synchronized. They had done everything right, followed every tactical doctrine, and they were losing. The swarm approached like a living wave of darkness, organic ships that pulsed with alien life, growing and adapting with every passing moment. They had already broken through 2 defensive lines. This was the last stand before the core worlds. Then the human fleet arrived. Captain stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching the battle unfold on his screens. Around him, his crew worked with practiced efficiency, called out enemy positions from her tactical station, while engineer monitored the ship's systems. Coalition Command is asking why we're not in formation, reported, a hint of amusement in her voice. Tell them we don't do formations, replied. Tell them to watch and learn. The human ships scattered across the battlefield like drops of water thrown into wind. No pattern, no geometric precision. To the coalition observers, it looked like chaos. To the programmed to predict and counter organized tactics, it was incomprehensible. A young pilot named led his fighter squadron into the heart of the swarm. His ship was small, fast, and armed with weapons that hadn't changed much in 500 years. Missiles with chemical warheads, and a reactor that would make any coalition engineer cringe at its simplicity. "You're flying too close to that organic ship," his wingman warned. "That's the point," laughed. He pulled his fighter into a spiral that would have been impossible in atmosphere, but he flew it anyway, muscle memory from atmospheric training taking over. The ship tried to follow, its organic structure twisting to pursue, but it couldn't match the erratic, seemingly random movements. Fired a missile loaded with chlorine gas. The vessel adapted its hull to resist the chemical, and that's when he fired conventional explosives at the same spot. The adapted section, weakened by its rush change, ruptured. The organic ship began to tear itself apart. "Squadron, you see that? They can't adapt to two different things at once." His voice crackled across the comm. "Hit them with something, then hit them with something else." On the Defiant, Engineer worked in the cargo bay, surrounded by mining explosives and chemical containers. Things that were never meant to be weapons, but in human hands, everything was a potential weapon. "What are you doing?" a coalition observer asked, watching in horror as she welded chemical tanks to the mining charges. "Making torpedoes," said cheerfully. She attached a basic guidance system to the assembly, something so primitive it barely qualified as technology. "The swarm adapts to our smart weapons, right? So let's give them stupid weapons. No computer means nothing to hack, nothing to predict." She loaded the makeshift torpedoes into the launch tubes. They flew through space on simple trajectories, propelled by compressed gas. When they hit the ships, the results were devastating. The organic hulls couldn't adapt fast enough to the combination of concussive force and corrosive chemicals. But the swarm was learning. A massive dreadnought, 3 times the size of any coalition battleship, pushed through the defensive line. Its hull had already adapted to resist the human weapons it had encountered. Energy shields that the swarm had grown specifically to counter human tactics flickered around it. "Defiant, you need to fall back," Commander N's voice came through the comm. "That dreadnought is too powerful. We've already lost 5 ships trying to stop it." She looked back at him. Years of serving together meant they didn't need words. "Remember the Kursk maneuver?" asked. "They'll think we're crazy," said. "They already think we're crazy," smiled. "Let's prove them right." Opened a ship-wide channel. "All hands, this is the captain. We're going to ram that dreadnought. I need all non-essential personnel to the escape pods now. You have 3 minutes." The coalition fleet watched in shock as crew members evacuated from the Defiant. Engineers, support staff, even some bridge crew climbed into the small emergency vessels. A skeleton crew remained. "Defiant, what are you doing?" N demanded. "You can't sacrifice your ship." "Watch us," replied. He cut the communication and turned to his helmsman. "Full power to engines. Plot a collision course for that dreadnought's central mass." The Defiant surged forward, its nuclear reactor pushing beyond safety limits. Still on board, had rigged the reactor to overload on impact. The ship accelerated to speeds that made the coalition crew's sensors flash warnings. The dreadnought noticed the approach. It adapted, growing additional armor, preparing its weapons. It had destroyed dozens of ships. One more wouldn't matter. But the dreadnought had never fought humans before. It didn't understand that humans didn't just sacrifice ships. They sacrificed themselves willingly, knowing it mattered. At the last second, and strapped into escape pods built into the captain's chair and tactical station. "See you on the other side," said. "Better have coffee waiting," replied. They ejected just as the Defiant struck the dreadnought. The impact was catastrophic. The Defiant's reactor breached, releasing energy equivalent to a small star going nova. The dreadnought's organic hull, adapted to resist energy weapons fired from a distance, couldn't handle the point-blank detonation. The massive ship split in two, its interior exposed to vacuum. The swarm hesitated. For the first time in its existence across multiple galaxies, it encountered something it couldn't predict: beings that would destroy their own ships, risk their own lives, for the chance to win. Spider swooped in, scooping up its escape pods. "Captain, you're absolutely insane," the young pilot said, grinning. "Takes one to know one," replied, catching his breath. Across the battlefield, the human fleet pressed the advantage. They used tactics the Coalition had never seen: suicide runs, combined chemical and kinetic attacks, weapons so old they appeared in no modern database. The swarm adapted to each new threat, but humans had thousands of years of warfare to draw from. Every time the swarm adjusted, humans tried something different. By the end of the day, the defensive line held. The swarm retreated, pulling back to analyze what had happened. They had faced the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy and won easily. But these primitives, these humans, had hurt them. On the Coalition flagship, N watched the battle replay, trying to understand what he had witnessed. His tactical officer looked up from her station, her expression one of awe and terror. "Commander, I've analyzed the human tactics. They break every rule of modern warfare. They're inefficient, dangerous, and completely illogical." "But they work," N said quietly. "Yes, sir, they work." The swarm would adapt. It always did. But N found himself believing something he hadn't believed in months: that they might actually survive this. Because humanity had brought something the Coalition had forgotten in its 10,000 years of civilization. Humanity had brought the willingness to fight dirty, to break every rule, to sacrifice everything, and to never, ever surrender. 2 weeks after the first victory, the mood in the Coalition Command Center was dark again. The swarm had returned, and this time they were ready. Commander N watched the battle report scroll across his screen. The swarm had adapted. Their organic hulls now resisted chemical weapons. They had developed countermeasures against kinetic attacks. They even anticipated the erratic flight patterns that pilots used, adjusting their responses to match human unpredictability. "We're back where we started," the Coalition tactical officer said, defeat clear in her voice. "Every advantage the humans gave us is gone," the swarm learned. Across the fleet, Captain was having the same conversation with Admiral via secure channel. "They're adapting faster than we expected, sir. We're running out of tricks." "Then we need new tricks," replied. "Get me Minu, and tell her I need something impossible and I need it yesterday." Minu arrived on the flagship wearing a civilian jacket over his military uniform. He had been a psychologist before the war, specializing in alien communication patterns. Now he was humanity's specialist in something the Coalition had never considered: psychological warfare. "Admiral, you wanted to see me?" Minu asked. "The swarm has adapted to our weapons. Can we fight them without weapons?" Minu thought for a moment, then smiled slowly. "They're a hive mind, right? Perfect unity, perfect communication, perfect coordination. That's what makes them so dangerous. That's also what makes them vulnerable." Minu pulled up his research on a display. "A hive mind is optimized for efficiency and logic. It processes information perfectly. But what happens when you feed it information that isn't logical? What happens when you introduce chaos?" 3 days later, the human fleet engaged the swarm again. But this time, strange broadcasts accompanied the attack. Music played across all frequencies: classical symphonies, rock concerts, traditional folk songs from a dozen human cultures, poetry in 50 languages, art, photographs, videos of human life, children laughing, lovers dancing, athletes competing. The swarm's communication network, designed to share tactical data instantly across billions of organisms, suddenly carried something it had never encountered: abstract thought, emotion, and beauty. On the Defiance Bridge, monitored the swarm's response. Their reaction time is slowing, just microseconds, but it's measurable. Microseconds we can use, said. All ships exploit the delays, fire when their formation shifts. The battle was still brutal, but humans pressed every tiny advantage. When the swarm adapted to the music, Minu broadcast human arguments and debates. When they filtered that out, he sent comedy shows that made no logical sense. But it wasn't enough. The swarm was vast, and even with delays, they were winning through sheer numbers. In her laboratory aboard a human science vessel, stared at captured tissue samples. She had been working for 72 hours straight, surviving on coffee and determination. Engineer sat beside her, equally exhausted. The connection has to be there, muttered, examining brain scans of organisms. They communicate through some kind of telepathic network, quantum entanglement maybe, biological radio, something. Leaned over, looking at the same data. What if we don't try to jam their communication? What if we add to it? Add what? Noise, chaos, something they can't filter out because it comes from inside the network. Pulled up a different screen, showing human neural patterns. What if we put a human mind into their system? Stared at her. That's insane. The incompatibility alone could kill whoever tried it. Human consciousness is individual, chaotic. The hive mind might just destroy it. Or it might be like pouring water into a computer, said quietly. Destructive to the machine, fatal to the water, but effective. They brought the idea to Admiral. He listened in silence, his face grave. You're talking about a death sentence for whoever volunteers. Yes, sir, confirmed. But if it works, it could give us the opening we need to destroy the swarm's central hive ship. Once that's gone, the rest should fragment. Called for volunteers. He expected a handful of soldiers, maybe some older crew members who had lived full lives. He didn't expect the line that formed outside his office. Hundreds of people, young and old, all willing to die if it meant stopping the swarm. He chose a test pilot with neural interface experience. Young, brilliant, and fully aware of what he was volunteering for. The night before the procedure, visited him in his quarters. You don't have to do this, said. Smiled. Yes, I do. We all do. That's what being human means, right? We see something that needs doing and we do it, even when it costs everything. The procedure took 6 hours. They used captured technology to create a neural interface, then modified it to accept human brain patterns, and monitored every second, making adjustments as consciousness began to merge with the swarm's communication network. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then the swarm's movements across the entire battlefield stuttered. Ships collided with each other. Formations broke apart. The perfect unity wavered. Inside the network experienced everything the swarm was. Billions of minds all thinking as one. But he brought something they had never encountered: individuality. Memories of his childhood, fears about the future, love for people he'd never see again, hope that his sacrifice mattered. Human consciousness in all its messy, contradictory, beautiful chaos. The swarm tried to destroy the infection, but's mind wasn't just data they could delete. It was experience, emotion, and will. Every time they tried to isolate it, it spread further. His last thoughts echoed through the hive mind. Humanity's refusal to surrender, encoded into the very network that was killing him. The central hive ship is exposed, and shouted from the coalition flagship. Their defenses are failing. Admiral gave the order. All ships concentrate fire on the hive ship, make sacrifice count. The combined fleet unleashed everything they had. Plasma, missiles, rounds, torpedoes. The hive ship's organic armor, weakened by the internal chaos had created, couldn't adapt fast enough. But they needed more. The ship was massive, and even with the advantage, it was regenerating. We need someone inside to finish it, said, looking at. He nodded. Get me a boarding team. Small, fast, and willing to bet their lives on a manual detonation. Was the first to volunteer for the boarding party. Wouldn't miss it for anything, Captain. They assembled a team of 12, including and they loaded into an assault shuttle carrying humanity's oldest weapon, a thermonuclear bomb with a mechanical timer. No computer, no remote detonation, nothing the swarm could hack or predict. As they prepared to launch, engineers stopped them. "Captain, the countdown timer. Make sure it's at least 30 minutes. That should give you time to get out." Looked at her steadily. "You know as well as I do that we're probably not coming back." "I know, but 30 minutes means you might, and that's worth having." The shuttle launched toward the dying hive ship, carrying humanity's last hope and humanity's oldest promise. They would fight to the very end, and they would never abandon their friends. The assault shuttle pierced through the organic hull of the hive ship, cutting through tissue that pulsed with alien life. Inside, the corridors were like the inside of a living creature, walls that breathed and floors that moved beneath their boots. Captain led the team forward, weapon ready. Behind him, monitored their position while and the others covered their flanks. They carried the bomb between them, a simple metal cylinder that weighed 200 pounds. "The core should be 3 levels down," said, checking her scanner. "But these passages keep shifting. The ship is trying to heal around us." An organic barrier grew across their path. Didn't hesitate. He fired a burst from his weapon, the chemical rounds dissolving the tissue. They pushed through, moving deeper into the hive ship. Above them, the battle raged. Admiral coordinated the largest military operation in galactic history. Coalition ships provided covering fire while human vessels executed attack patterns that seemed random but were carefully calculated. Every ship, every pilot, fought knowing that their friends were inside the hive ship, racing against time. "All ships maintain pressure on the hive ship's outer hull," commanded. "Don't let it seal the breach. Our people need a way out." But inside the ship, his team was running into problems. The passages twisted in ways that made no sense, changing direction as they moved. The swarm was adapting even as it died, trying to trap them. "Captain, we're not going to make it to the core at this rate," one of the soldiers said. Made a decision. "Split up. Take half the team and find another route. We'll draw the ship's attention. Whoever reaches the core first plants the bomb and sets the timer for 30 minutes. "That's not enough time," protested. "It's all we have," met her eyes. "We knew this was one way when we volunteered. Let's make it count." The team split. His group moved loudly, firing weapons and setting off small explosives to attract the hive ship's defenses. His team moved quietly, slipping through the shifting corridors like ghosts. Stayed with his group. As they fought through waves of organic defenders, the young pilot laughed. "You know, when I joined the fleet, I thought I'd die in a cockpit. This is much stranger." "Stranger, but no less important," replied, firing at a mass of tentacles that tried to grab them. They reached a massive chamber, the ship's equivalent of a heart. It pulsed with energy, feeding the swarm's telepathic network. But this wasn't the core. They had been led into a trap. The chamber sealed around them. Organic walls closed off every exit. "Well," said calmly, "this complicates things." Meanwhile, his team found the core. It was a sphere of pure energy suspended in organic tissue, the brain of the entire swarm. Without it, the billions of organisms would lose coordination. "Set the bomb here," ordered. They placed the device beneath the core and set the timer. Her hands hovered over the dial. 30 minutes, optimistic estimate. 20 minutes, more realistic for their escape. 10 minutes, certain death but guaranteed success. Set it to 20 minutes and activated the countdown. Move back to the shuttle. But the path had changed. The ship, sensing the threat, had shifted its structure. They were lost in a maze of organic corridors. In the trap chamber, scanner picked up the bomb's activation signal. 20 minutes. He looked at his team, saw the understanding in their eyes. "The bomb's active. His team did it," he smiled. "Now we just need to buy them time to escape." They fought. Not to win, not to escape, but to keep the ship's attention on them, to give team every second they could. The organic defenders swarmed them, and the humans met them with everything they had. Was the first to fall, buying time for his squad mates to reload. He went down fighting, his last words transmitted to the fleet, for Earth, for everyone who refused to give up. One by one, the others fell. But they held that chamber, prevented the ship from sealing the routes needed. Their sacrifice measured in minutes purchased with their lives. Team burst onto the shuttle deck with 5 minutes remaining, but the shuttle had been crushed by the ship's convulsions. They were trapped. Captain's signal just went dead, one of her team members said quietly. Closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself 1 second of grief. Then she opened them, focused. The bomb goes off in 5 minutes. We find another way out. Check for emergency escape pods, maintenance hatches, anything. They found a launch tube meant for the swarm's organic missiles. It was small, barely large enough for a person, but it led outside. One at a time, go, ordered, pushing her team members into the tube. She went last, squeezing into the narrow passage as the countdown reached 30 seconds. The nuclear explosion tore through the hive ship's core. The energy sphere shattered, sending a wave of destruction through the organic structure. The ship began to break apart. Tumbled through space, her emergency suit's thrusters firing to stabilize her. Around her, the debris of the hive ship spread like a dark flower blooming. She saw her team members, safe in space, being picked up by rescue shuttles. But signal never appeared. Neither did S or the others who had stayed behind. Across the battlefield, the swarm reacted to the hive ship's destruction. Without their central coordination, billions of organisms suddenly became confused, directionless. Some continued fighting on instinct. Most simply stopped, their perfect unity shattered by sacrifice and the bomb's detonation. The remaining swarm ships began retreating, pulling back beyond the galactic rim. They had conquered a dozen galaxies, defeated countless civilizations, but they had never met humans before, had never encountered beings who would sacrifice everything, not for victory, but for each other. The coalition fleet pursued as far as the rim, then stopped. Let the swarm run. Let them remember what happened when they attacked humanity's friends. 3 months later, the Coalition Council chamber hosted a very different meeting than the one where they had learned about the swarm. The chamber was full, representatives from every member species present. Commander N stood beside Admiral, preparing to offer humanity full membership in the coalition, but before he could speak, stepped forward. "Before you make your offer, you need to understand something," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber. "We're not the heroes from your legends. We're not perfect. We make mistakes. We lost good people in this war. Captain, pilot, and dozens more whose names deserve to be remembered." "They died heroes," N said. "They died human," corrected. "They died because they chose to. Because when faced with the choice between safety and doing what was right, they picked right. Every single time." Admiral spoke next. "We accept your offer of membership, but understand, we weren't a fable. We were a reminder. The universe doesn't care about your technology or your civilization's age. It cares about your will to survive, about whether you'll fight for each other when it matters most." The council voted unanimously. Humanity joined the coalition, not as junior members but as equals, as the species that had reminded the galaxy what courage looked like. 6 months after the war ended, a new ship was commissioned. The UES Defiant II, with as its captain. On its bridge, a memorial plaque listed the names of those who had died, and all the others who had sacrificed themselves so that others might live. Stood before it during the dedication ceremony, speaking to the assembled crew. These people weren't perfect. They were human. They were afraid, they made mistakes, they sometimes doubted. But when it mattered, they chose to stand and fight. That's not a legend, that's who we are. The ship launched. carrying both coalition and human crew members. Behind it, Earth hung in space, no longer hidden but ready to defend its new allies, ready to show the galaxy that humanity had never been a myth. They had always been real, and now the entire universe knew it.